for the fathers, how do you show up?
So not only is there no manual to parenting, a lot of us don't have a blueprint.
We grow up hearing it takes a village to raise a child. But once you are finally out of that child phase, you need your own village.
Do you have the safe space?
Yeah, I feel like over time it took a lot of work and effort to learn how to cultivate like safe spaces.
I can create my own anxiety from just overthinking, and it helped me rationalize a little bit better in my own mind. Like, hey, don't sweat the small stuff.
But fellowship is like that deep, intimate conversation. It's communication, and outside of the communication, it's embracing.
I need some friends or some family to tell me, hey, listen, you're going to get through this. You're going to get through this hurt, this pain, this void, because even though they say time heals all wounds, it doesn't heal this wound.
If you're asking that question, then that means you're right there on the precipice, right there on the edge of wanting to go over into a new version of yourself.
But yeah, being present is another expectation that, men have to carry and uphold to. But
just to add something real quick, my dad passed on the 18th. Every day after that felt like the 19th for like the next 3 months, right? It always felt like the day after.
I think this is majority of the brothers that are out there. Our weakness is our pride. And that's what gets us into trouble. That's what
I just couldn't do it. I just kept trying. And when you say that, it's because I got down on my knees that day. And I cried to the Lord. That was nobody but God, because there was nobody else there for me. That's how I know that sometimes we think that God's not there, and He's always there.
We are like nurturers.
Yes.
But sometimes that nurturing doesn't extend to self. Just remember, anything you do in access usually becomes toxic. You can take your authority back. You are no longer the victim. You are a survivor. You do have a voice. Let's figure out what that voice is, and let's figure out what that voice wants to say.
If you have experienced trauma and neglect and misuse, abuse, I want you to know that there is something on the other side of that.
Well, hello, people. Welcome back. So as you know, this isn't live because I said that, announced it last week, but nonetheless, we are here. I'm going to be in the comment section. So if you have any questions, anything to say, I'm going to try to interact with you then. But nonetheless, here we are, episode 4 of Join the Fight series. This one is entitled, I Am Not Ashamed. And as the hour or however long we're here, however long it goes, you're going to understand why I have titled this, I Am Not Ashamed. So obviously I'm not here by myself. You see there's another face on the screen. I have met him through this new leadership council that I'm a part of out here in New Hampshire. A few days in, obviously we do the whole like, who am I and who are you and what's your story? And when I heard this man's story, I said, okay, one day we're going to have you on the pod because, sir, he has a story. So we're going to get into it. But nonetheless, he is an entrepreneur. He works out here in the city of Manchester, really trying to encourage young people. He can get more into the details. And he is a part of the new leadership. He is a fellow with me. We're almost done. We got 2 more months left. Without further ado, ladies and gents, Evenor. Round of applause.
Thank you, Jermaine. Thank you.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it to be able to share my story, my experiences, and the work that I'm involved with.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of people who have these deep stories and they kind of like keep it to themselves because they're like, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. But it definitely speaks to who you are, like the integrity of who you are, that you're able to unashamed saying, this is what I've been through, this is what I've done, and to empower young people or really anybody after that is huge. Now, usually I don't want to go like straight into the story unless that's what you want to do. Like we can do some small talk before we get into the the deep stuff, or if you just want to dive in, you can dive in.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, let me just say, let me start first by saying that I work for the Manchester Police Athletic League, located on the corner of Beach and Lake Ave in the heart of the city of Manchester. My role here is I am the intervention programming coordinator. So I oversee 2 of the 3 intervention programs that we have, which are, so the 3 programs in total is the Juvenile Court Diversion Program, the Futures program, and the Choices program, which is the newest of the 3. And Futures and Choices are the 2 programs that I directly oversee. And that's basically how I got started. So I feel like telling the story, I'll be hopping around, I guess, chronologically. So how I got involved in this work, and then I'll go into depth about the programs, is so about 4 years ago, I was released from prison after serving a 15-year sentence for second-degree murder. When I was released, I had made some really good connections on the inside. I'd really turned my life around while I was on the inside. I was very proactive and wore many hats on the inside, between volunteering and, programming, education, and just, my jobs on the inside. I was able to make some really good connections with staff, one being a corrections officer who eventually became a parole officer. And he would return to work overtime at the prison because the prison is, having staffing issues. So a lot of the parole officers would come in, work overtime. He would see me. And so he, saw kind of like my progression over the years. After he left from being, full-time behind the walls, and he started saying, hey, do you have any interest in giving back when you get out, maybe working with kids? And I said, absolutely. I'd definitely be open to that. And once I was released, we connected with him, and he plugged me in with the then operations director for the Manchester Police Athletic League, MPAL for short, who was starting a pilot program, which was the Futures program, which is a weekly skills and mentoring program. And it came about because of, around the time of COVID, a lot of kids were, they're still doing it, but at that time in particular, there was some former MPAL kids that it was getting around that they were being, involved with gangs, criminal activities. These kids nowadays, they post everything, they make videos glorifying, a lot of the stuff that they're doing, basically just mirroring what they're seeing on social media across the country. And so, Jana Stevens, who was the then operations director, she said, we're going to do something about it. Let's try to do something about it. So she came up with the idea for the Futures program. And an aspect of that program was having, guest speakers with lived experience. So after the connection was made, I was invited to be a guest speaker. I did that several times. And then I was kind of extended an open invitation to say, hey, we're here every week. You're more than welcome to come and just hang out with the kids. So I started doing that. I didn't even think twice about it. I just started coming every week after work, and just hanging out. And just organically over time, I kind of, became a facilitator, right? And just co-facilitated the program with Jana. And, after maybe a year and a half, I was asked if I had any interest in, maybe a part-time role. So they wanted to compensate me for my time. And, I was kind of hesitant, to be honest with you, like, who doesn't like money? But at the same time, I don't like muddying the waters and have people question my motives, because that's not my motive. I wasn't trying to get paid off of it. But they're like, hey, like, this is the reality is, like, we have some grant money. We need to use it. And, we see your dedication and we'd love to, compensate you for your time. And so I was like, all right, I accepted. And my role kind of expanded, where I started, spending time on the juvenile court diversion program, sitting on the panels, which was a great experience, because it's crazy. Like, when I was 15 years old, I was on the other end. I was a kid in juvenile diversion down in Nashua. So it's kind of cool to be on the other side. And it gave me an opportunity to meet many of the panelists, which are all volunteers. And a lot of them actually are juvenile probation officers in the city were, are strongly invested, and gave me an opportunity for them to know me to know them, and understand their work and how they're kind of different in a sense where, they're very progressive. They utilize restorative justice practices when working with the kids. So I was kind of amazed, like the level of commitment and like that they're thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually what happened was, there were certain policies or on the state level that were changing. And one was a movement to divert kids, like even more so than we were already doing at that time on the state. Everybody, knows about the Sununu Center, the case that they have right now with a lot of the former residents, and all the, terrible things that happened while they were at the Sununu Center, then YDC. So it made sense, right? Like, we don't want kids in the system. It does not work, right? The juvenile system mirrors the adult system, and we clearly know that it's not working. There's so much room for improvement. So it's great to see that, New Hampshire is trying to make a change, right? Like, divert these kids. So originally, diversion for youth was only offered to first-time nonviolent offenders. Once the state started rolling out this, it was called the Juvenile Probation Transformation, they kind of, that went to the wayside, which is a good thing. So it opened up the doors for opportunities for kids to have other opportunities, or to fix their course, or straighten their course, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we felt the effects immediately. Our numbers doubled. On average, we were seeing 65 to 75 kids per year, and now we're seeing well over 150 kids per year come through panels. And so again, like, it was actually a good opportunity to then start referring those kids to the Futures program, the weekly program that we were facilitating. But we also quickly recognized that wasn't enough. Meeting with kids once a month, and at that time, the contracts for kids in the program were 3 months in length, and again, not nowhere near enough time. Like, it almost felt like as soon as we started making some inroads with these kids and getting some buy-in, they're gone. The contract's up. They did their thing, and we had to let them go. But we also started seeing some kids that are like opted to voluntarily return, and we started seeing that like a little more consistently, which was great. It means that we're doing something's good is happening here. If these young people are seeing the benefit and the value of our program, and that their time is better served, here, working with us. So again, we started brainstorming. Jane and I were like, all right, like, what can we do? What's the next step?
Yeah.
And almost before we could even like start talking about that, an incident happened at Central High School where we had like a dozen kids that were involved in a riot. It was two rival gangs at Central. Of course, young men of color, black versus brown, unfortunately. And so we're like, okay, we're not waiting for these guys to go through panel, because the next panel wasn't going to be scheduled for like, I don't know, 3 weeks or something like that. So we're like, no, we're going to do something right now. We're going to get all these kids in at once to our Futures program. And so we did that. What I did was I recruited one of my friends who I did time with, that I had a great amount of confidence with. He's like a brother to me. And so he was like, absolutely, I'll help you. I got you. You know what I mean? So we did an orientation on a large scale because there was concerns for security and things like that. And so like, all right, how can we make sure that this is going to be a safe, orientation for everybody here in the building? So we asked that the parents attend. All together, we had the officer at the time that was assigned, who is never in uniform. We asked him, can you just dress up in uniform that day, just to kind of like a show of strength. We had one of the JPOs come in, one of the juvenile probation officers come in, and we just talked to him. You know what I mean? We gave him the lowdown, what the expectations were, understanding like, yeah, you guys were at each other's throat like a week or two ago, but you know what I mean? Like in here, that's not going to happen. Everything is respect. We're going to give you that respect. We're going to treat you like young men. We understand on a daily, like you're not getting that respect. You're not getting that that treatment on like on a level playing field. And that's what sets us apart. So we understand that, you know what I mean? We understand how we're not authority figures. We're not here to, you throw you over my lap and give you a spanking, none of that stuff. You know what I mean? This isn't a punishment. We're trying to share our experiences, having gone through the systems from a young age, and how, there's better options, there's better opportunities for you. So it was actually went off without a hitch. many of these men, the young men, got involved in the program, and we had zero incidents in the time that they were in the program. And it was kind of fun. So the magic is seeing the kids work together. And one of the ways that we do that is like we like to do icebreakers. So it's like something that's fun, maybe even goofy or something like that, right? To kind of get the kids to be kids again. Of course, whenever we talk about these icebreakers, at first everybody's eyes are rolling like, I ain't doing this and that and blah 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 blah. But before you know it, guess what? These young cats, they're having fun. They're competing. Some of the icebreakers we do are competitive in nature, but also it instills like teamworking. You know what I'm saying? So work with this other person, and we intentionally mix the groups because obviously when they first come in, they sit down because we serve dinner and stuff like that, and they always it's like anywhere, lunch at school, or for us, the child hall in prison, like certain people sit with certain people, certain folks, certain circles sit together, and that was the same. But when we did these activities, we intentionally mixed them up, and it was great to see these two kids that like literally were at each other's throat weeks before, helping each other out in this moment, for a common goal, which was to win whatever that game was at that time. Mm-hmm. And again, it's so encouraging, and again, magic. There's beauty in that, and again, just to see these kids be kids, because you know how it is. Like they try to act like adults. They try to act, more mature and tougher, and these different facades that they're trying to project, mirroring obviously the behaviors they see at home or in school, and definitely in the media. So again, we were like, all right, we need to come up with something. You know what I mean? So we started spinballing some ideas of what would this look like? What would another program look like that could really address the need of the community to work with these young people who are just, not making the, healthy connections with the adults in their lives. So we came up with the concept of choices. Choices is just that. I mean, the name we came up with because that's what we do. So like Futures, there's a mentoring portion of it, and the mentors are again folks with lived experience, and so we present you. These are the two paths you can take, and I can paint you a very vivid picture of what it looks like going through the juvie and adult system, and all the the ripple effects of that, consequences of your actions and how it affects your family, your friends, your community, your peers, your ops. You know what I'm saying, like and everything that entails. But also, like, we don't try to harp on the negative when we're trying to figure out, like, hey, but this is another route for you. You know what I mean? Like college, you know what I'm saying? And that may look different. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily a university. It could be a community college. It could just be a technical school. You could, learn a trade, whatever it is. Like, figure out what your passions are or what your strengths are and leverage them, utilize them. So you can, you know what I mean? Have a successful and productive life. Yeah. Versus the opposite, where you, like myself, coming out of prison in my late 30s and starting all over again. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want that for you. We want you to be 40 years old, looking back like, wow, my past 20 years was super productive. You know what I mean? Like, I'm an entrepreneur, or you know what I mean? Like, I learned this incredible trade, and now I have a home and a family and all these things, and not playing catch up like like some of us unfortunately had to do. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to get, actually some support from the police department. They were actually a huge proponent of this. They understand, like, they're not making those inroads. They're unable to build those relationships with the kids like we can, because Unfortunately, just that badge, it doesn't even matter. You could grow up in the hood, you know what I mean? But because you have a badge, the kids don't want to connect with you. They don't trust you. Yeah. Versus someone like myself that grew up, 20 minutes down the road in Nashville, a very similar city like Manchester, and falling into those traps, unfortunately, not successfully navigating the landmines in my life, and actually like intentionally blowing myself up in certain cases. Yeah, I mean, it was because of the MPD, we were able to get funding. MPAL was like, yes, we will be, we'll house you and we'll support you and this and that. Just making those connections. So another portion of the choices program. So I was talking about this, there's a mentorship. There's the education part, which is not a formal education. It's more of the debunking and challenging the false perceptions a lot of these kids have, being enamored with, the street culture, the gang culture, violence, drugs, the, toxic, co-ed relationships, stuff like that. You know what I mean? And then there's the mediation is just, working with the kids. In a lot of cases, they're on probation. So working with their probation officers, going to court, speaking on their behalf, talking about some of the progress that they're doing. Also with the parents, being able to kind of like be that, try to bridge that gap between the parents and the child in many cases. And even like amongst peers, again, we have situations where we'll have kids in the group that belong to opposite affiliations, and many times some of these kids are like, hey, like I kind of got smoked with these dudes, and I'm a little worried, like I leave the building, and I'm like, say no more. And that's what I do. I leverage my relationship with these kids and like, hey, you already know that stuff, like please check that shit at the door. You know what I mean? But even beyond the door, please, this kid's in here trying to do the same thing you do and doing the right thing. So let's avoid the conflict, you know what I mean? And I always try to say, like, especially when it's, kids of color, I'm like, man, like we got to stop doing this stuff to each other. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And causing more of a gap between our communities. You know what I mean? We got to embrace the diversity and how much more we have in common. Build each other up and to get out of here. To think beyond, these 4 to 6 blocks around this building. You know what I mean? That these kids are, menacing.
Yeah. So you can tell he does this. Like he just gave a whole spiel. And when you're good at networking and you're good at having these speeches, like here's what I do. It performs and it sounds like that. But to recap, basically you were you were institutionalized basically from teenage on up, and then something happened while you were, on the inside, as we will say, and you were able to make that pivot and make that change. And then everything after that was, I'm not just going to turn my life around, but I'm going to help other people in my community and beyond make better decisions or choices moving forward, which is amazing. And I feel like we had a conversation yesterday, and I was really just thinking about my own situation with my brother, and my brother in and out until he passed away. Just like, I'm like, do you really like jail that much? Like, sir, do something different. And I don't think he had that pivot that you had in while you were inside. Towards the end of his bids, he was trying to do better, and he had a whole program that he wanted to do, and my mom's really trying to get me to like take that program off the floor. But I was like, what do I know about half this stuff? Like, do I work with young people? Yeah, but I don't have that lived experience. Like, I'm the lived experience as in I was the sister of someone on the inside, and the chaos that happened with that. But I think it speaks to mentorship and what mentorship can really do for a person if you are able to reach them in that very vulnerable season and stage of their life and be like, yo, I've been there, done that, and let me tell you what it looks like. So that you don't have to be the one that goes down it. So obviously you shared a lot and you answered a lot of the questions that I had in those 10 minutes that you were talking. But what was like that pivotal moment when you were on the inside that said, I can't do this no more. Like, I have to do something different. Was it a conversation? Was it after realizing like, yo, I'm in here for 15 years? Like, what was that thing that was your wake up call to be like, I got to do different?
So that's, thank you for the question. And a great question. And honestly, it's I hear it a lot. People always like, what was that? What was that the catalyst for change for you? And I'm like, there was no aha moment. There was no eureka or none of that stuff, right? Like it was just steady progression. You know what I mean? It was just a steady kind of like, really finding myself, right? Because in many cases, like, the adults in this world who have the most challenges, they're really just hurt children in adult bodies that just never had the opportunity to grow up because they didn't have that support. They didn't have that environment, you know what I mean, of care and love and compassion and things along those lines, right? So it's just kind of like slowly realizing, like, and hearing from guys like, man, you're bigger than the gang, bro. Like, I don't know why you're running around with these knuckleheads, and like, that's not for you. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, what are you talking about, man? Like, these are my homies. I grew up with them, that whole thing, right? But just kind of steadily seeing like, this is not like, you see guys in and out. So originally I was sentenced to 18 years. And part of me was like, I know I have a light at the end of the tunnel, but that's not guaranteed, especially with my involvement with the gang on the inside. There's a possibility for anything. Anything can happen while it's not a guarantee that you're coming home alive. You know what I mean? It's come home in a box. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I had I was I'm a father. So while I was incarcerated, I had two young kids. And so let me kind of go backwards a little bit, right? So when I was incarcerated, at the time I had sole custody of my kids. And I was unfortunately made the choice that I made, rob somebody of their future, their life, something that I can never give back. And so always in the back, I always understood that like I have this debt to the universe that I will never ever fully be able to pay off. But what I can do is try to chip away at that. And I wouldn't even say as a gang member, like I'll tell you about this. I was the worst recruiter for the gang because when anybody came through and like was, hey, like interested or whatever, and I'd sit them down and I'd tell them like almost kind of like what I'm doing with the kids now. You know what I mean? Like, if you're ready for prison and jail and potentially getting killed and like, the collaterals of the, possibly your family, you know what I mean, being hurt by some of the actions and your involvement with this stuff like that, by all means, join the club. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna picture, paint this rosy colored, you know what I'm saying, like, lie. That's not what it is, Sure, does it have its positive elements? Absolutely. You know what I mean? That's why it's so popular, right? Like, every community and stuff like that. But in the long term, there's no future in that. So, I went to prison. Luckily my folks got custody of my kids. So my mom and my step-pops, they raised them. My mom used to bring my kids up every week to visit me and stuff like that. So they were the anchor that tethered me to the outside. So that I didn't fully get lost and immersed in my life in the prison, because that happens a lot. The guys that have no connection to community, they get lost in the sauce, right? In the prison, they just get so absorbed in that. This is it. This is everything. You know what I mean? And so they don't ever think to the future, and that this action could prevent them from going home. And in many cases, these are the guys that are only doing a few years. And that's why you'll see, like, maybe like, unfortunately, in the case of your brother, the in and out, you know what I mean? Like, where I had like a longer time to kind of be in timeout and to figure things out. So that's really what happened. My first half of my bid, I was just doing what I did before. Yeah. Gangs, the drugs, the violence, you know what I mean? How to circumvent the system, find angles to leverage or whatever. But that gets tired, you know what I mean? It's just the drama, the stress that's tied to that, not having that peace, knowing that the cops can go in my cell and shake it and potentially find something I'm not supposed to have or whatever, you know what I mean? Just like, you know what I mean? That gets tiring after a while. You mean the drama, you know what I'm saying? Gangs is just a lot of drama with gangs, you know what I'm saying? The politics with that it's ridiculous. Yeah. So it just gets tiring and tiring and tiring. Then my kids getting older and asking me more and more, in-depth questions. And I'm like, how do I answer this question? Like, I'm not trying to lie to my kids, but at the same time, like, find creative ways to like omit some facts to kind of dumb it down, or soften in like the story and how explaining how I was incarcerated. And honestly, it wasn't until I think my daughter was 12 and my son was 14 years old, that the opportunity arose where I was able to, I was like, I need to now take the Band-Aid fully off, you know what I mean? And use this as a learning moment to teach my kids about why violence isn't an option. There's other outlets to express your feelings, to get those out, you know what I mean? And to talk to grown folks, you know, to deal with these emotions and stuff like that, and not resort to violence, because, you know, once you lose control, like, that's it. You know what I mean? Whatever happens after that, you got to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
So it was like, again, like, it was many parts to that, you know what I mean? But also, one of the things one of my first goals I set for myself when I went to prison was, once I learned that there was an accredited high school, like an official high school in the prison. I was like, oh, I'm getting my high school diploma. You know what I mean? I already had my GED, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is something I want. And I just, because I never did it, you know what I mean? I you know, I cheated myself with that experience. So I want to do this, but also I want to set an example for my kids. And I did. I you know, I chipped away at it. You know what I mean? Like, again, like, my activities in the prison didn't allow for me to always have access to the education because of, you know, disciplinary reasons and stuff like that. But I eventually did get my high school diploma. You know, and had my kids, my nephew, my daughter. You know what I mean? I wanted them there. I wanted them to see that. I wanted to make them understand, like, this is like a necessity. You know what I mean? Like, it's a goal that should be, like, not even questioned to do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, even though they were younger, I feel like it sunk in, and just, you know, to fast forward, all three of them graduated high school. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that has to do anything to do with me. I'm sure it's their own, you know, their own work ethic, and, you know, the examples of my mother, my step-pops, and my sister, you know, being there for them and supporting them along the ways. But also, like, you know, I was involved in a lot of programs in here. One of them was the Alternatives to Violence Project, which amazing program. It started in, I want to say, Greenhaven, the prison in upstate New York, and eventually spread to other prisons and out to the community. It's actually international now, or has been international. They've even done work in war, you know, countries with internal conflicts like Rwanda and Colombia. You know, so it was great value. And the beauty of the program was a volunteer program. And, you know, all the guys obviously were there because they wanted to be there. And it was guys from all different walks of life on the inside. So in the prison, there's a hierarchy, you know, based on your charges, you know, based on how you carry yourself. And but in this program, like, all that stuff was out the window. Everybody's on the level playing field. We're equals. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it gave an opportunity to guys to kind of learn about each other and build, tear down stereotypes and stuff like that, and you know, change their mindset. And so that was one of those things where it gave an opportunity for me to kind of shine. I mean, I wasn't trying to shine, but just like I did my thing, and the volunteers were like, hey, you know, we ever thought about facilitating and this and that, and I never really thought about it. But I liked the program. I enjoyed it, so I just continued. I did their basic, I did their advanced. They had one-day workshops. And eventually, like, I kind of got pulled into the facilitating role and doing a T for T, a training for trainers, and facilitating the program up until, you know, at that time, the director of community corrections, you know, was seeking evidence-based programming and you know, cut this program, which was a tragedy, because unless you're in the program, you don't really understand the impact it had on the guys that were involved. And also the volunteers are coming from the street and being able to see us, and they change them like, oh, like wow, like, you guys are on point. And you know what I'm saying? It just, you know, it demystifies a lot of, you know what I'm saying, of those you know, false concepts that folks in the outside have.
The PMS.
Yes, PMS. I'm glad you brought that up, because so PMS, I was telling Jermaine yesterday, one of my boys, when I was in county pretrial, kind of put me onto that. I'm not sure if he coined the phrase or whatever, but it's prison movie syndrome. And he was talking to the effect of how guys come in, and because they have, you know, what they saw on TV and the movies and music, how you're supposed to be in prison, they come in and, like, they want to join a gang, or they want to go try to knock out the biggest dude on the block, or whatever it is. And it's all BS. It's BS. You know what I mean? You know, prison is as productive or unproductive as you make it, depending on your choices while you're on the inside. And again, some of these guys are thinking, well, I have to join a gang, I have to do these different things, and it's false. But also, the opposite is, like, people on the outside, you know, looking at us on the inside, thinking of us as, oh, they're animals, lock them up, throw away the key, You know what I mean? Like anytime you see a posting on social media in the comment section when it's talking about a person that was just paroled or just sentenced, and it's just crazy. I don't even like reading the comments, but it just speaks to the ignorance of the people outside.
Yeah.
That are coming from a closed off perspective, from a non-empathetic perspective, in understanding that over 90% of people in prison are coming home.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're coming home.
Yeah.
You don't lock somebody up and that's it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, oh, we can ride. You know what I mean? Like, never have to worry about them again.
Right.
That's not true. They're coming home at some point. You know what I mean? And who do you want as your neighbor? They're going to be your neighbor. Who do you want as your neighbor? Do you want the educated program guy? You know what I'm saying? Or do you want the guy that's just warehoused? Sitting in a 6x9, 24/7, not doing anything. Coming out, you think he's gonna be better than he was when he came in? I don't think so. You know what I mean? That's not the truth. You know what I mean? So that's why people need to really kind of change their mindset of how they look at prison. It's supposed to be corrections. It's the Department of Corrections. You know what I mean? Where's the corrections at? Where's the rehabilitation at? You know what I mean? You have to fund that. You have to support that. You know what I mean? Education is key to that.
Finger snaps all around, Evenor, because listen, I've been on one recently. I was literally telling my best friend this the other day. I'm like, I've been on one. And when I say that, I want to disrupt systems because people get really comfortable in their preconceived notions and their biases. They get really comfortable in it. And it's like, when you get stuck, you don't allow for growth. And when you want to operate in your own little safety bubble, it's like you're ignorant to a lot of stuff that's happened. And that was my truth. When my brother was in, I refused to and when he passed away, like I had to eat this shame and this guilt for years. But it's like I didn't want to see my brother as a prisoner, as a convict, as a felon or whatever. Like that's my brother. You know what I mean? So it was hard for me to go see him because like I don't want to see my brother walking to me in chains and there's a plexiglass between me and him. Or because again, PMS, right? So I'm thinking I'm gonna see my brother in the plexiglass, not realizing that we're sitting at a table. But it was very uncomfortable for me, and so I refused to see my brother for who he was. My brother had 9 million different names because he had to, be about what he was about. But one thing my brother didn't play about was family. And so even when he was doing his stuff, no one ever knew that I was his sister. No one ever knew that my mother was, his mother because he knew to separate that. My brother then had 5 kids and all of them, knew what their father was doing. But he was always like, he would always say like, man, I need you to protect mom. I need you to watch out for my kids. And it's like, how about you do it? How about you get your life together and you do it? But, it's something about when you're institutionalized and how they try to drill that in you. And society is not embracing of people who've been in. They're just like, no, they're a menace to society. They don't belong out here. And it's only about a matter of time when they go back. And it's like, or people make stupid mistakes. We make it all the time. Theirs just happened to be an offense where they got caught and now they're in. Like there's no, in my opinion, there should never be a moment where you say this person can't be rehabilitated.
Amen.
Like everyone has that chance. You know what I mean? And I feel like we as a society or as a community, like you were saying, I love that neighbor thing. And I was really hoping you said that today. Because it's true. Like we probably live right next to a whole lot of people that's been on the inside.
Absolutely.
And we're like, oh my God, they're such great people until you know their story. And then the moment you hear, like I was in, like your whole perception of the person shifts, whether consciously or not. And it's like, we can't do that. People are people. People make mistakes. Things happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you said, you know what I want to do today? I want to kill somebody. That's what I want to do. It's like, that's not always a choice.
No.
But what is a choice is, what do you do now? Now that you know, now that you are on the outside, let's make the right choices. Are you going to choose to follow, gang banging life in street life because you think it's really what it is? And it's like, street life ain't for you. It's not. And I try to tell people that, these young people I work with all the time, like, you really think the streets want you? They'll replace you like this.
Yeah. Oh
They
yeah.
claim they want you. They claim that no, we got you, family, we got you. And it's like, no, it's very conditional based. If you do for them, they'll do for you. The moment you stop doing for them, now you're an enemy.
Yeah.
And now you gotta look over your shoulder. Like, I'll never forget, there's my brother came out, and I don't know which kid it was, but one of his kids was in the infancy stage. And he was like, yo, I gotta go to the store, get some diapers, and then we gotta drop it off to the mom's house. Cool. When I say my brother was paranoid, walking through them aisles, I was like, yo, what are you looking? I was confused. I was like, why are you constantly looking over your shoulder? He's like, because I gotta make sure I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, bro, it's like we're in Walgreens and it's like freaking, I don't know, 2 PM. Who's really gonna come for you in Walgreens at 2 PM? He's like, that's not the point. And when I say paranoid, this man reclined all the way back when we got in the car. And I was like, I was confused because I didn't know what that was. I was like, yo, you good?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, yeah, just drive. And I was like, okay. Like, and this is the kind of stuff that's like, you don't realize when you're making these choices, it's not just you. Your family has to deal with this.
Yeah.
Kids, your sister, your mom, your cousin, your aunt, like.
Absolutely. Bullets don't have names.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Bullets don't have names.
Finger snaps, man.
It's sad.
So we talked about the prison bars, the literal prison bars. What about your mind? Because after all, this is a mental health pod that we do. So, like, I mean, I know yesterday you talked about the anxiety you felt while being in, before you got in. Like, what mental health journey did you go through? Because again, everyone's journey is different. What was the mental health journey for you?
So I would say I unfortunately am one of those, thick-skulled individuals where to this day I haven't seen a therapist. I know I've had those discussions with my friends, with my mentors about seeking, professional help, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it's been, you could say self-medicating. In the past, that was the big thing, right? As a kid, coming home, in the inside, I took advantage of the downtime, I guess you could say, or the alone time. You know what I mean? So I did a lot of, self-reflecting. Very much I'm a person that's in my mind, and it's a gift and a curse, I guess. And can make it real hard working with other people because I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? You know what I mean? Because I've been, spinning around my head so much, I could have sworn I told whoever about, whatever it is, the conversation about. There were clues like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I catch myself like, you're right, my fault. I'm in here. You know what I mean? And I thought I already told you about this. But honestly, like I guess the biggest part of my mental health journey is just finding, like, surrounding myself around healthy folks. You know what I mean? People I can open up to and I can talk to and that will just listen. And then when I need them to, respond and I need some feedback for that to happen, I would say, taking advantage of the limited amount of programs that were available in prison. I did what I could for, like self-help wise, try to get involved, just to learn more about myself, you know what I mean? And I was open to that, you know what I mean? Again, because I overthink, you know what I mean? But it's nice to see these things, and learn these different like tools, how to, to cope, coping skills and, anger management skills, conflict resolution, communicate, all those things, and how it plays into like the overall, my overall health. You know what I'm saying? How I interact with others. That's the biggest part, right? Because a lot of folks, like, we walk around with trauma, and unfortunately, we may or may not know that we're kind of like lashing out at other people because of that. You know what I'm saying? Which isn't fair. You know what I mean? You have no idea what I've been through. You know what I'm saying? I can't expect you to know or to make an assumption or whatever, right? Like, you just think, oh, this was a jerk. Like, what's his problem? Why is he being like this with me? And what it is me keeping distance. You know what I mean? I'm keeping, you know what I mean? I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, stay over there. I don't want close relationships. And I saw that, you know what I mean? Because that's one of the biggest things in prison is that you may bond with somebody that's getting out in 2 years, but you still got another decade and a half to go. You know what I mean? And the sad reality, right? When people get out, they want to forget about prison. You don't really maintain too many of those relationships. And it was the opposite. Even the folks that did want to maintain relationships with me, like I would for a little bit, but at some point I'm just like, I want them to live their life. I don't want to have that connection to the outside. You know what I mean? So then I would just stop calling because they couldn't call me. I mean, they could write a letter, but who does that anymore? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, I'm going to kind of go back to like the gang stuff. It's the truth. Like one of my homies, we did a panel yesterday, a Q&A panel for McLaughlin Middle School here in Manchester. And one of the points that one of my panelists brought up was that, you know, in the gangs, like, you know, once you get locked up, like you don't see them. You don't see them until they come through. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like you don't, you know, hold on to like, oh, you didn't write me, you didn't send me nothing. It's just like that you forget about that because in the moment you're happy because your brother's there and you know what I mean? Like you have good company or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But again, they leave and out of sight, out of mind. And that's how it is for most folks.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, my mental health journey, like I said, is a little different than others. You know, where I guess I didn't look too much outwards for help, but in a sense, kind of leaning on my social circle because as the years progressed, that circle became smaller and smaller, and a little more intentional with who I was surrounding myself with because I wanted to be with folks that were like-minded, that were big on, you know what I mean, like don't want to play the games, the prison politics. I mean, they don't want the drama, that they just want to go home. They want to, you know what I mean, live a normal, productive, you know, life. And so that was a huge part of it for me. And maintaining my relationship with my kids, again, that was another part. But again, it's different once you get out and rubber meets the road, and especially where my kids are no longer, you know, 2 and 3 years old. They're, you know, 16, 17 years old, you know, have their own lives, you know, their own personalities, obviously, and stuff like that. They have different priorities. So it was almost like another challenge getting out. So like, I felt like I was able to conquer prison and how I could maintain myself while I was in there. And what I did was I was kind of like a workaholic, which I guess wasn't, you know, doesn't really speak to balance. But again, while you're in there, you just want to stay busy. You want to stay busy. You want to be productive. And for me, I enjoyed helping other people. You know what I mean? So, you know, I did peer support. You know what I mean? So I worked with guys that were on suicide watch. I did hospice. So obviously I worked with folks that were, you know what I mean, on their way out. You know what I mean? You know, the RCC, the Resident Communications Committee. You know what I mean? I was on this committee that would meet with the administration, with the warden monthly, with the DOC commissioner quarterly, and other admin folks and stuff like that. And again, we were kind of like advocates for the prison population, trying to, you know, more programming and improve conditions and, you know, just more stuff for guys that were on the inside. But yeah, I mean, like, I guess, you know, again, that was me trying to fill my cup while I was in there, stay busy, be productive. And then again, another part of that was it really played into my game plan, which was like, eventually I want to go back to court and try to petition the court so I can get out earlier. And thanks to the Almighty, like that, I had that opportunity. You know what I mean? I was able to build up enough momentum when I was in there. And again, that kind of played to my mental health. I mean, knowing that there's an opportunity I can get out. And one of the small goals, like, or a dream I had was, I want to be there when my son graduates. I want to be there when my daughter graduates. The only way that happens is if I can get out, you know, early enough. And fortunately, I was able to do that. Like I said, I had the momentum. I built it up. Was able to go back to court. You know what I mean? Get some time knocked off. I got approximately 3 years knocked off. That's why I originally told you I was sentenced to 18, but I only ended up doing 15 for that reason. And I was able to see my kids graduate.
That's amazing.
Motivation, you know what I'm saying? That was, you know, for me, that was helped me keep sane, you know what I'm saying? And having those ties to my family, that was my tether to the community. Otherwise, very likely, like a lot of my homies that were inside, they were, you know, super involved with the politics. And a lot of them got shipped out. They got shipped out of state. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that to my family. Can you imagine? You know what I mean? Like, it's bad enough I'm in prison. God forbid I'm on the other side of the country because I continue to be a dumbass while I'm in prison, not thinking about selfish. You know what I'm saying? And that's something I just want to say quickly is like, there was a unit manager who I did not like, you know what I mean, at all. But he dropped the gem for me one day. And he's like, hey, he's like, you know what you and a sex offender have in common? And immediately I'm like, nothing. I want you to. He's like, hold on, listen, hear me out. what you and a sex offender have in common is that you were both selfish at the time you committed your crime because you're only thinking about yourself. And across the board, that goes for anybody, you know what I mean, that's committed a crime. At that moment, you're only thinking about yourself. You're only thinking about yourself. And then here's another one. I'm sorry, but there was this old head. He was a Florida inmate that was doing time up here, and he was the barber. You know, crazy. He had some outlandish stories, but he was entertaining. He was a good dude. You know what I mean? And it was a healthy outlet for me. I'd volunteer in the barbershop. I'd help him, clean up, and we used to do appointments and inventory and all that stuff. One day, and I hope, can I cuss on here? Is that okay, or do I need to censor myself? I'll censor myself. I can see your face. So he asked me one day. He's like, "Do you know who the baddest MFer on earth is?" And I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of bad money. You know what I mean? On the planet, like I can't single that down. Like will that down to one person? He's like, no. He's like, I'll tell you who it is. He's like, it's the single father or the single mother that every day works, maybe 2 jobs to maintain the roof over their kid's head, food on the table, clothes on their back. He said, you know what makes them bad? Is because they also are having all of these temptations, friends in their ear telling about, hey, bro, why are you killing yourself working 2 jobs? Let's go flip this brick. You know what I mean? Like we can make a quick come up. Or I know this lick. I know these cats that I got a stash or whatever. You know what I mean? We can come up big. And they're saying no to that stuff. That's easy. You could literally, you know what I mean? Could come up and nice. But there's a lot of strings obviously attached to that. But or other temptations. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, like let's go drink, or if they're married, like let's go, I know some shorties, we can go lay up with or something like that, right? Like all these temptations, and they're saying no to all these things. You know why? Because they know if they mess up, that who's gonna take their place to take care of their kids, to do what they're doing. That's what makes them bad. You know what I mean? So again, kids or a lot of folks in general, right? They have the game all upside down, where they think, it takes a real, to do this and do that. Like, no, it takes a real dude to like say no to that stuff. You know what I mean? It's easy to feed into your animal instincts and lash out in with anger and ferocity. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these things, like it's a whole nother to like, rein all those feelings in and stick to your path. You know what I mean? Not follow the mob, not follow the crowd. You know what I mean? Like here, I'm gonna kill his name, Kierkegaard or something like that. Said the crowd is untruth. The crowd is untruth. And that's real. You know what I mean? Just because all the boys are doing it doesn't mean you got to do it.
Right.
Right. Those stupid. The simple cliche of if everybody jumps off the bridge, you're gonna jump off the bridge. Like, nah, man.
That's so good, because honestly, we live in a society where if it's not trending, what are we doing? And so we follow trends. We do what everyone else is doing, and it's like, but why? Where's the individualism in any of this? Like, you are not created to be a carbon copy. Like,
no,
make your own wave. It starts with a little ripple, and then waves are impactful too. And it's like we don't try to ruffle any feathers, because ruffling feathers means that we have to come against adversity. And it's like, well, yeah, which is why, again, I had to bring you on, because I'm like, I have these moments within myself where I feel like my life is just like, oh my God, it's crumbling. And I have a pity party. It's like, woe is me. And then you hear stuff like that, where you literally had to start over. You literally had to work for everything that you have right now. And you literally had this whole, like, I don't know, dog mentality of like, I don't care what I got to come against. I'm going to come out of this. And then I look at myself and I'm like, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. But not to invalidate myself. But then it's like, people are literally out here like struggling to make a name for themselves. That doesn't have like felon attached to it, or addict attached to it, or abuser attached to it. Like, people are really trying to create this new perception of self. And then here I am crying because whatever, right? So obviously we're hitting close to that hour mark. And, I say this every week, like, if people need more, let me know and we can bring these folks back. But I wanted to kind of recap what you've been saying, is that, like, healing that inner child, you mentioned that like at the beginning, that is so important. Like we are literally walking, talking 7-year-olds on the inside. That's why we have outbursts, because what do little kids do when they want what they want and they don't get it? They throw temper tantrums. It just looks differently because we're adults, right? And it's like a lot of us have to go back and heal that inner child, because if we don't heal that child is going to constantly show up
Mhm.
at the most unopportune times, and we're going to have to suffer the consequences for it. And then you are alluding to like, you're not your past. The past doesn't define you. It just defines where you were.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to learn how to like unattach yourself to it, because we carry stuff. We carry identities, we carry pains, we carry poor decisions. And then we wonder why we never are able to see ourselves past what we've gone through. And it's like, well, you're holding on to too much.
Yeah.
Like you still identify with everything that you've done. It's like, acknowledge it, hold yourself accountable to it, but you are not that. Like you have the ability to recreate self all the time, if that's what you choose to do. But do it in a way where you're no longer feeling shame and guilt and like ownership of that thing that you've been in. And then finally, of course, what I love about your story is that there's a lot of opportunities that people are granted, but we don't always take it. And it just sounded like they were like, hey, you want to do this? You're like, yup. Hey, there's this new thing. You want to do this? You're like, yup. And that's the way that you were able to go from this, what am I doing, lost kid, I don't know my left from right, to not only do I know what I'm doing, but I'm going to help other people find their path and find their way to get through the dark places that unfortunately we have to deal with in life.
No, absolutely. I mean, honestly, like I had zero clue what I was going to do when I got out of prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was kind of grasping at straws, and just, I guess the timing was good for a lot of different things. You know, I had different, career paths since I've been out. But obviously found my calling, and which is amazing. Also, like an aspect of this again is like, that we always talk about over here is obviously the focus of the program is to work with young people so they can avoid the same pitfalls that we found ourselves in. But it's also like you're saying, I'm also giving purpose to the guys that are coming home. You know what I mean? The team of volunteers that I have that that I did time with. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing. You know what I mean? And that also speaks to like this is also part of our mental health. You know what I mean? And our therapy is working with these kids. You know what I mean? Because it fills our cups, it gives us purpose. And in the process, we kind of like, we make those connections. There's those parallels in the lives of these kids in our history, and it allows us to kind of like, like you said, unpack some old stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's a big part of this is that we, after our meetings, our weekly group meetings, we debrief. On our own, my team of volunteers, we hang out, and a lot of times like these conversations come up, and where we help and we're supporting each other. We're creating this network of opportunity for one another at the same time. And I don't know if I mentioned, but we work very closely with the Department of Corrections. We have a vetting process, in place with them for guys that are coming out. We're kind of creating a pipeline for guys that are interested in giving back when they get out, so they can get out and they can do that. I mean, maybe it's not with kids, maybe it's with adults. You know what I mean? But at least they'll have some of that training, and we're working towards that to start doing some things on the inside for those guys. So there's just so many aspects to it. And again, like there's these opportunities for us to meet with folks in the community, you know what I mean? And share and shed a light on like, yeah, I did 15 years in prison. Yes, I was charged with second-degree murder. You know what I mean? Yes, I was in the gang for almost 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, but look at me today. You know what I mean? This is who I am. This is the work that we're doing. So again, I always say this. I feel like I'm an ambassador. You know what I mean? Of folks that are coming home. You know what I mean? Returned citizens. And I love that. I love tearing down stereotypes. I was doing it on the inside, unbeknownst to me. I remember I used to be really quiet in class, in the prison, and then opportunity popped up. Like I love history. I remember in a history class having a conversation with my teacher, and then after the class, one of the guys, it was almost kind of like a backhanded compliment. Right? He's like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were so articulate and this and that." You know what I mean? The same thing when I was facilitating programs, but that's cool. When I took it as a compliment. You know what I mean? Because it just, you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? Now you know. You know know what I'm saying? So maybe the next time you run into another, Latin brother, like you're like, you know what I'm saying? Like you might be pretty smart. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like more than whatever they may think. You know what I'm saying? Again, this is New Hampshire. So if you're not from Nashville, Manchester, you know what I'm saying? Like, most likely you're, you know what I mean? Your peers are pretty not as diverse. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. Representation matters, ladies and gents. It absolutely matters. So like I like to do with all of my lovely guests, I like them to leave with a call to action, right? Or just encouraging words for what you hope for them to take from this conversation. It could be like a one little one-liner of, I don't know, do your work and don't make excuses. I don't know. If you were to leave the people with some encouraging words or a call to action, Mr. Pineda, what would it be?
I would just say, keep your hearts and your minds open. I mean, it's as simple as that. Keep your minds and your hearts open. Try to be as objective as possible. You know what I mean? Utilize and leverage empathy if that's a strength of yours, or you know what I'm saying, to put yourself in another person's shoes. What's the guy's? I keep forgetting his name, man. He's a motivational speaker. I think he's like a runner, Michael Goggins or something like that. David Goggins. I'm sure the comments and when this goes live Tuesday, they're gonna kill me with it. But this dude said something in his story. He came up in abusive household. His dad like tore his behind up all the time. You know what I mean? For nothing. But what he said is like, man, I looked at my dad. I'm like, wow, what kind of childhood did he have for him to be like this with me? I mean, my sister shared that. She shared that with me because of our background, how we grew up and stuff like that, speaking about our first stepfather. I'm like, that's true. You know what I mean? Because everybody wants to look at somebody, oh, he's a monster. You know what I mean? How could he do such a terrible thing? But you got to dig deeper. You know what I mean? Like, how is that monster created? You know what I mean? Who brought him up? Who is that monster in his life? And it's like we were talking about, cycles. You know what I mean? Cycles. Breaking the cycle. And that's what it is. The definition of insanity, just doing the same thing over and over, you know what I mean? Expecting this from yourself, right? It's a cycle, you gotta break it at some point. And that was like a big thing, one thing I learned on the inside. You know what I mean? Like, damn, man, like this is a cycle, and I need to break it because I'm just doing the same thing over and over, thinking, oh, if I do tweak this, no, bro, it's the same thing. You're just putting lipstick on it now. You know what I mean? Like, there's no success there. You're not changing the narrative. You're just, you know what I mean? You're just dressing up that's already ugly.
I love that. Stay open, people, because you never know. You don't know people's stories. You don't know what they're going through. And it's real easy to judge, but if we don't like being judged, let's not judge other people.
Amen.
Because when we make mistakes, we're like, oh my God, no, I don't want them to know. And it's like, right, that same shame and guilt you feel, don't put that on somebody else. But Evenor, you did so great. Thank you so much for coming on. Your words were absolutely amazing. They were finger snap moments where I'm just like, I'm just going to let him, what do they say now? I'm going to let him cook. Like, I'm going to let him do his thing because you were doing it. Join us next week. I have another guest coming on. I went to college with her. She shattered my shot put record, but you know what? That's fine because she deserves that. So next week we're going to talk about the heart of a champion with you. Most people know her as J Mass, just whatever you want to call her. But she's a friend, a really good friend, and she has a story to share as well. So join me next week. I'm about to say 6 p.m. 7 p.m., y'all. 7 p.m. I will see you then. I really hope you enjoyed something that was said today. Because again, if we can reach one, we can reach 1,000, right? Because we're all called to territories. And if we share with the next person, other territories and other communities will be impacted. So with that being said, y'all have a blessed night. I will see you next week, 7 p.m. If you have any questions for Evenor, you can find him on Facebook. He's there. LinkedIn too. What are the socials you have, sir?
IG, LinkedIn. I got Snap. I don't really, don't hit me up on Snap. It's pointless. I'm barely on that thing. But on Facebook. It's my name.
And on IG, it's your name too?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank
All right,
you.
y'all. hit him up because clearly he likes to talk about these things. If you want to make connections with him, please do so. I am here. I am the little connector. I'm the one who connects resources. So do what you have to do, people. But anyway, I will see you next week.